Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio, and I'm your host, Jess Root. It is a Friday afternoon, the Friday before the Arizona Cardinals, losers of 2 straight, take on the Kansas City Chiefs at home, which it will be kind of a nice homecoming as the Cardinals were on the road for the only 2-game stretch of the season in which they had 2 straight road games. Up until a couple weeks ago, it was home road, home road, home road. Then they had the 2 games in a row at home, 2 games at home, the road. And now we're back to alternating for the rest of the season. Cardinals fans will be glad to get the Cardinals home and the Cardinals themselves as well, because they've really not looked good in the past 2 games as they lost 19-3 to the Seattle Seahawks 2 weekends ago. And then this past weekend, 29-18, that is, lost to the Atlanta Falcons. If you had listened to us earlier in the week, Seth Cox and I were on the air reviewing the game, talking about some of the implications out of that loss and looking forward to this game against another team who is a bit on a skid as well, the Kansas City Chiefs, who are also very much in the mix of the playoffs, only they have a little bit different situation. The Cardinals, who sit atop at the NFC still, they had a cushion's all gone, but they still are very much in control of their destiny. Kansas City at 7-5 is one of seems like half a dozen to 2. Like it seems like the entire AFC is around at 7-5 right now, and so they are fighting for their playoff lives. And based on some of the conversations that I've had, so if you've been up on RevengeOfTheBirds.com, you saw that I had a Q&A, a question and answer session with Joel Thorman from ArrowheadPride.com. And he thought, and he believes it's going to take 10 wins for Kansas City to make the playoffs. Cardinals fans, as today is our preview show, as we will talk about the upcoming game this weekend against the Kansas City Chiefs. I have a special guest from ArrowheadPride.com, the SB Nation Kansas City Chiefs team site, which is the sister site of Revenge of the Birds. And I will note for you guys, being the Kansas City Chiefs, it is a much, it's kind of the big brother of a whole bunch of sites, as the fan base in Kansas City is a rabid, ferocious, passionate ones for their Chiefs. And it's really good to see. But before we get started, before I bring our guest on, I would like to let you know that the show is brought to you today by Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audio content. Internet for you Revenge of the Birds Radio's listeners, you are able to test out the service for free. Head on over to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. It's audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds, where you can test out, give it a test drive. Get a free month of service. You get yourself a free audiobook download. I'll tell you that my family, who we travel every few months up to visit my in-laws, it's a 9 hour drive. Having a nice audiobook to pop into to turn on in the car makes it smooth things out. Yeah, almost as good as having different movies on for every kid and their different devices. Almost as good as that. audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds, and you'll get yourself your free service, that free month of service, and get yourself a free audiobook download. Again, I said that we have a treat for you. I've got a treat for you, as we have from ArrowheadPride.com, one of the writers, and we have Matt Verderame from ArrowheadPride.com, a guy I have more familiarity with Joel Thorman. Joel Thorman is the big guy at SB Nation when it comes to the NFL, and also AirHardPride.com. Matt is Matt.
I'm doing good.
Coming on to Revenge of the Birds Radio. How are you today?
I'm great, Jess. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, as we're going to talk about the Chiefs, this is kind of like the opportunity for Cardinals fans to get to know the Chiefs. It's a team we don't. And historically, this is only, I believe, the 13th time the two teams have met historically. And considering how long the Cardinals have been around historically, they've been around forever. One of the oldest teams in the league. It's really hard to believe that 13 times within the regular season, there's been some preseason matchups. But take us back to the offseason. What were some of the things that obviously two off seasons ago, the Chiefs went through a transformation much like the Cardinals did, and when they let their staff go, they hired Andy Reid, just like the Cardinals hired Bruce Arians, and they had similar success. Only Kansas City went off to a tremendous start, ended up making the playoffs. Fantastic season. And what's interesting is that the Cardinals at one time, there was rumored to be 95. One of the local media members said at 95% certain that the Cardinals were going to hire Andy Reid, only to see him end up in Kansas City. That was where he had a whole bunch of changes. This last offseason, what was there in the way of roster shuffling, coaching shuffling? What was the offseason draft? Take us through that if you would.
Yeah, sure, Jess. I think you hit it on the head. I think both teams ended up doing very well with their coaches. I think both fan bases are very pleased. This offseason, the Chiefs didn't do a lot because they were just so cash-strapped. They really let a lot of players go. Brandon Albert left. He went to Miami. That was something the Chiefs fans were ready for because we had drafted our Fisher the year prior, and people knew that was coming. Jeff Schwartzen had a really unexpectedly good year with the Chiefs. A lot of fans want him back. John Dorsey, the general manager, decided to let him walk. He got a payday in New York, and unfortunately for him, he's been hurt. Hasn't panned out. Chiefs cut Brandon Flowers. They didn't like him as a fit for what they do. The Chiefs are a big-time man press team. The Chiefs are very rarely ever in zone, which is something Flowers excels in. They don't play off-man. As we'll see on Sunday, the Chiefs are going to get up on the line and play a lot of very physical bump and run. So they let Flowers go. They let Olivia and the other guys go as well. Tyson Jackson and John Osmo went to the Falcons. And the Chiefs really replaced those guys just by bringing up depth, by bringing the second string up to the first string, and it's played out really well for them for the most part. The offensive line has been a major issue all year long, so that's one place maybe they could have done well to sign one of those other players that they let walk. But they did bring in Vance Walker, who was supposed to be a big pass rush specialist for them. Turns out Alan Bailey's had a career year, so Walker's kind of gotten buried a little bit. They brought in Kevin Dickerson 1 week into the season. He's been a nice addition for them. He's done well against the run. Doesn't bring much in the pass game, but he's usually not on the field in a pass situation. We'll see a lot of him this Sunday with Bailey being out with a concussion. So the Chiefs really didn't add a whole heck of a lot as much as they just let a few guys go, bring some guys in, and then in the draft, the one player who will see a lot of he'll start a cornerback this week for them is Phillip Gaines. He was a third-round pick out of Rice, and he is somebody who has really been exceptional. He's played very good football for the Chiefs. You can make an argument right now. He's the second-best cornerback on the team after maybe coming into the season as fifth or sixth on the depth chart. He did a great job against Emmanuel Sanders on Sunday against Denver, despite the loss. And then Zach Fulton, a sixth-round pick out of Tennessee. He's a Chiefs right guard. And despite having some struggles in the earlier part of the year, Fulton's really come on. He's been a nice addition. He's actually been one of the brighter spots at this offensive line. So Kansas City has some pretty solid pieces out of the draft. D Ford is the first-round pick, but basically taking a redshirt year while Tom Bali continues to play out his deal. So all in all, it was a quiet but good offseason for Kansas City.
Well, good. In particular, that's interesting that the D Ford was that kind of when the Chiefs drafted Ford, who was a guy that many Cardinals fans had their sights on with his pass rushing ability in college. He was a guy I found extremely intriguing as a match, especially since the Cardinals drastically need some pass rush help off the edge. And was that sort of the plan going into year one, is expect him to sit behind Holly and Houston until one or both of those ends up going elsewhere this next offseason? And with that being said, has his season been a disappointment because he hasn't been on the field more?
You know what? It's a little bit of a tough question to answer. I'll start with the first part. They definitely expected that he would sit. I don't think there was any idea that he would play a lot early on. I think fans maybe had a hope that the Chiefs would kind of employ exotic packages and get him on the field, but Justin Houston right now, you could arguably make the case he's the best outside linebacker in football. So you're not going to take him off the field. He's leading the league with 14 sacks. And then Tom Bowley only has 5 sacks on the year, but he's had a litany of pressures. He's played very well. He's literally been about a fingernail away from 5 other sacks this season. So I think the expectation for Ford was to come in, was to learn, and then after this season, the general consensus is they'll franchise Justin Houston. They'll slap a tag on him and then try to work out a long-term deal. And Ali next year has a $12 million cap number, but if the Chiefs cut him, they saved $11 million. Now, I talked to Joel Corey earlier this week from CBS Sports. He's a former agent, salary cap expert. He does not think the Chiefs are going to cut Tom Ali because D. Ford has only seen 6% of the snaps on defense this year. He only has half the sack. He has 4 tackles and obviously an extremely limited time. And I think that is a little disappointing. Chief fans thought maybe there'd be more of a rotation. Maybe Ford would play 20% of the snaps, something in that realm. But it hasn't happened. When he's been in, he has flashed despite being a very limited player. I mean, he had a couple of really nice plays against Miami earlier this year. He played well against the Rams when he got in, when they were blowing out St. Louis about a month ago. So a little disappointing, hasn't been seen more, but I think when we have seen him, the tools have shown through us to why they made him the first round pick.
How much did they get? Because the one thing that D. Ford has kind of gotten picked on nationally would be that play in which it looked like he had nothing to do with tackling Frank Gore. Was that a big deal in the Kansas City in the Chiefs fans realm?
That was a play that, to be honest with you, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if anybody can tell you what he was doing.
It looked like he either had wanted nothing to, or he was just completely confused.
He said later, and I know the defensive coordinator Bob Sutton said later, a couple days after the game, that he thought that it was a play-action play. He was trying to cover somebody downfield. To be honest, I can't imagine that an NFL player would be scared of tackling somebody. I mean, these guys take on big blockers, and he, prior to that game, he had made plenty of solid plays, whether it be in the preseason or otherwise. So, I don't think he was scared. He was scared as much as I think he was just confused, but it just looked awful. It was a fairly contentious thing when that happened. A lot of fans were like, what is he doing? How can he have that little bit of awareness? And it was. I'm not gonna lie. It was one of those plays that you looked at and you said, I hope this doesn't define this draft pick. I don't think it will, because he does have talent, but it was a head scratcher. Hopefully it's something Chief fans can look back on in a decade and say, remember when D. Ford was at Green? But it was weird.
This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. We're talking to Matt Verderame from ArrowheadPride.com, and we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, whom the Arizona Cardinals will play this weekend at home. So up to this point, what's kind of the state of the Chiefs? Obviously, at 7-5, they're coming off a 2-game skid. Although they do have some impressive. I mean, they got the win over the Seahawks, where they just completely flattened them, just ran over them, giving the Cardinals some hope that they would be able to run. Only that that didn't happen. What is kind of the feeling about the season thus far? What has gone well, and what have been the Kansas City struggles?
Well, it's been an odd season from the standpoint they began the season about as miserably as you possibly could. They got blown out by the Titans in Arrowhead, and they lost Eric Johnson for the year to a torn Achilles. They lost Mike DeVito to a torn Achilles. They lost their left guard Jeff Allen to I believe it was a torn pectoral muscle. I mean, you couldn't have scripted. At the end of that game, you felt like they were going to go 0-16. I mean, it was the worst football game I've seen them play in a decade, and that's saying something with the Chiefs. So it was unbelievable. And then the next game, they lost, but they almost beat Denver at Mile High. So it was a game everybody in the Chiefs' kingdom, so to speak, thought that they'd lose by 30, and then they rallied. They won 7 of 8, as you mentioned. They crushed Seattle's vaunted defense. They beat the Patriots by 27 points on Monday night. They went to Miami and blew them out. They beat Buffalo in an ugly game. They went on the road, won that game, and so they won at San Diego. So there was a real tidal wave of momentum, and they'd gotten themselves to 7-3, and they're going into Oakland, who hadn't won a game, of course, at that point the entire season. They're like, well, they can't lose to Oakland. It would almost be impossible. And sure enough, they out-Chiefs themselves and found a way to blow that ridiculous game in that monsoon out in Oakland. And then, last week, I don't know whether, there's no excuse. You wonder if maybe the news about Eric Berry and his possible lymphoma maybe took away from some of their preparation. But they just, against Denver, to be frank, they just looked unprepared. That game, they looked as though they had no emotion. I mean, they were down 14-0 5 minutes into the game. So they've had a roller coaster of a season. I mean, definitely, just to quickly touch on it, the strengths are they run the ball very well. The offensive line is a mess pass blocking. They're a total disaster in pass blocking, but they can run block. They can open up huge holes in the run game. Rodney Hudson is their center. He's their best lineman by a mile. He's very, very good. He's really come on this year. The passing game, it's good in short to intermediate passes. They do not throw the ball deep ever. I can promise you.
Well, I'll ask you about Alex Smith in a bit. That's kind of the MO on it. It's almost comical how there are some who think he's allergic to the deep pass. So we've seen him throw. He can make the throws. He just doesn't make the throws.
Yeah. Well, part of it is, in all honesty, part of it is he doesn't. He's very risk averse, and their offense is very much check the ball down. West Coast offense, take 6 or 7 yards. Where, of course, in Arizona, Bruce Arians is very much vertical, down the field. John Brown, if Fitzgerald when he's healthy. The Chiefs are the complete opposite of that. Kansas City likes to stretch you out horizontally. They will use all 53 yards of the field to make you cover all that area, but they will not throw the ball more than about 10 or 12 yards. Your safeties can pretty much sit in a beach chair because the ball is not going anywhere down the field. Barring a complete and utter breakdown. And the other problem is, frankly, they can't get open. The Chiefs receivers are absolutely just awful. Dwayne Bowe's decent. He's massively overpaid, but he's decent. One thing about Bowe is you can make a good catch in traffic, but Donnie Avery, Frankie Hammond Jr., Junior Hemingway was out this game anyway, but the list goes on. A.J. Jenkins, who's now out. They're abysmal. I've never seen a receiving core that literally cannot get open. Regardless of who's guarding them, what kind of coverage, it's amazing to me. They have not scored one receiving touchdown all year as a receiving group, and I don't think they will. Unless there's a tip ball and it's just a miracle in the corner of the end zone. Nobody is ever open enough.
If they can pull off the Anthony Fasano touchdown where it just kind of falls. that was another. The Chiefs have had some very, very memorable video moments this year. Without if fans haven't really paid attention to their season, there's been some very memorable visual moments for that team.
Yeah, they've definitely had their share. The Fasano one takes the cake. It's been a year where, quite honestly, Kansas City, one of those types of teams where they can get out in front of you, they're very good because they can run the ball. When Reed has his whole playbook ahead of him, he's a very good play caller for the most part. And defensively, the Chiefs can't stop the run at all. They rank dead last in the NFL and runs against them per carry. I think the average is 4.9. They're brutal against the run, but they can pass rush. They have a very good pass rush. The number one in the league against the pass. They cover very well. They don't have any big names in the secondary, but they really do a great job of blanketing guys. Very, very rarely do the Chiefs have a breakdown in coverage. Even if the ball's caught, there's usually no yards after the catch. They're very good at that. But Kansas City, if they get behind in games, they're not built to come back from being more than maybe 7 points, maybe 10 points down. If they're more than that, they're probably cooked.
This is Revenge of the Birds Radio talking with ArrowheadPride.com writer Matt Verderame, previewing the Arizona Cardinals matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you think perhaps that loss to the Raiders? Now, I in all honesty, that was a loss. I was actually I don't remember how it came up on Twitter, about the Raiders potentially going 0-16. I didn't think it would happen. I thought they would end up winning 2 games. And interesting enough, 2 weeks before the game against the Raiders on that Thursday night game, I predicted a Raiders win. Not necessarily because of the Chiefs, but because of the Thursday night, the whole AFC West rivalry, because those games always tend to be close. But do you think perhaps how they reacted last week was kind of a hangover from having lost and kind of lost their way a bit, especially the way, because they lost the Raiders and then after that they get down really quickly? Do you see that having a psychological effect on this team moving forward, or is this a team that you feel can bounce back quickly?
I got to be honest. I think that's a fair assumption to make, but generally, I don't think that was the reason. I just think, and I think they will bounce back. I mean, they were 0-2 and looked absolutely buried with a road game against Miami. I mean, they were 0-2, and their following games were at Miami, home to New England, at San Diego, at San Francisco. So, I mean, you looked at that team, oh my God, they're going to be 0-6. And then all of a sudden, flipped the switch and just went bonkers and won 7 of the next 8 games. I think they'll bounce back. I really do. I think they're a very good team. I think they're better than they were last year, without any question. But I don't think the Raiders game was a cause and effect of the Broncos game. I really, to be just bluntly honest, the Broncos are better than the Chiefs. I mean, just flat. The Broncos. I think if the Chiefs played a perfect game, the Chiefs could beat them. But I think outside of that, Kansas City, they don't have the full team. If they had Derek Johnson right now and Eric Berry, it would be a tremendous help against the run. I think it'd be a lot different. But as it stands, the Chiefs need those guys back, which is probably not going to happen this year, obviously. They need a receiver or 2. They need a better offensive line. I think that Denver game, unfortunately, as a Chiefs fan, I think was just indicative of probably where those 2 teams are right now. I think the Chiefs are better than they showed in that game. But even if they played their best, as long as Denver plays its best, the Chiefs are just not good enough to beat them.
So let's talk a little bit about Alex Smith. He's a guy that the Cardinals, in particular, are very familiar with his years in San Francisco. In fact, were it not for not having enough pass attempts, he would have set the league record for completion percentage a game when he did it against the Cardinals, I believe, in 2012. How pleased he's a very interesting case because it's a guy who's done nothing over the last 2-3 years other than just win. He just wins games. Nothing spectacular about his game. It's almost comical how averse he is to taking risks. But check down this, check down that. But very efficient. He's talented. What is the feeling about Alex Smith when you talk to Chiefs fans? Is he a guy that they see being their guy for the distant future? I mean, good few more years, or do they is he a guy that they are hoping to replace with somebody who has more playmaking ability?
I think about a 60-40 split of Chiefs fans like Alex Smith. I think there's probably out of another 40%. Maybe half of it is kind of indifferent. They say, well, he's okay, but we wish we had Aaron Rodgers, who doesn't. And then there's another 20% that say he stinks. He doesn't throw the ball down the field. We need more playmaking ability out of the quarterback position. I think there's definitely merit to the idea that he doesn't push the ball down the field enough. He's a guy who's not going, unless a guy is wide open down the field, he's just not going to push the ball, which is frustrating because when he had to do it, he can do it, which is why I really don't understand sometimes why he doesn't, although I think the Chiefs receiving corps is probably more the answer to that than him. But, I like him personally. To me, in the NFL, you win by playing really good defense, by winning the turnover battle, and by being able to run the football. And Kansas City this year has not won the turnover battle because they've barely ever taken the ball away. But offensively, they don't turn the ball over. Smith has been typical Alex Smith. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't throw interceptions. He's actually throwing against Denver on the ball that was tipped up in the air and caught by DeMarcus Ware. He's very smart with the ball. He makes his reads. And one thing about Alex Smith that, frankly, Jess, I don't think he gets enough credit for is he's very mobile. There are times where, he has to be behind this offensive line, but he's a threat. He really is. There have been times this year where the Chiefs have faced 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, and nobody's open. He'll scramble for 15 yards and pick up a first down. I think, to keep it short, but, last year when they played in the playoffs against Indianapolis in that disaster of a loss they had, Charles went out of that game with 5 plays in. And they had pretty much no offensive weapons around him. I mean, Kelsey was out for the year at that point and everything else. And they scored 44 points, and he threw for 378 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. But he was unbelievable. He honestly looked like Aaron Rodgers in that game. And, of course, they found a way to lose because he had 45 points. But it was, it certainly is, I think, won a lot of Chief fans over. You watched that game and said, if he can play like that in a playoff game, we're going to be in pretty good shape if we can just get the pieces around the guy.
I at the same time, I kind of feel the same way in some ways about Alex Smith. He gets a lot of heat because he just, dink, dunk, check down this, check down that, bringing it to these playmakers. But if you look at it, there's nothing bad about that. And especially because he does it in a way, he delivers the football in a way that allows his playmakers to make plays. Not every quarterback can do that. And I've also had the thought as well, is he perhaps a case where he is super, super, super dedicated to whatever scheme his coaches give him, and as such that he is all in with the whole idea of he is just unwilling to, unless it's absolutely there. Because he played the same way in San Francisco, and it's kind of like the same concepts. Is it a detriment, or is it one of those strengths where he is super dedicated to the scheme and playing within it?
I think at occasion it can be a detriment, but I'd say 90% of the time it's a strength. His biggest strength is his intellect. He's very smart. You can watch him go through his reads. That was something when the Chiefs had Matt Castle that fans would just scream about, and justifiably so, because Castle would take one look, and if the first receiver wasn't open, he'd either try to force the ball in or he'd take a sack. And it drove you crazy. Now, Alex Smith is the complete opposite. Alex Smith, one of his biggest positives, he will go through one, okay, he's not open. Number 2, he's not open. Number 3, okay, he's open. And so I think it's definitely a positive. And, one thing about Smith, again, not to keep just drilling the Chiefs receivers, but it's just the fact. If you're Alex Smith and you drop back, you already know you have an offensive line ahead of you that you've probably got about 3 seconds to throw this ball, and you drop back, unless Dwayne Bowe is open, who, believe me, is the only receiver who's got any shot of being open on Kansas City, you'd rather check the ball down to Jamaal Charles or to DeAnthony Thomas or to Travis Kelce than try to fit a ball into Donnie Avery. I mean, it's just good common sense.
Well, especially the talent that you guys that the Chiefs have at running back and those underneath plays, those are playmaking play. Why wouldn't you get the ball to them?
Well, exactly, and that's the whole point. To me, a lot of fans will say, he had Avery. If he fit it in there perfectly for 11. And my contention is, well, who cares? Throw the ball to Jamaal Charles and let him run for 30 yards. He's, without any question, whenever the Chiefs, if there's any doubt, give Jamaal the ball. You give him the ball, because I got to say, I've watched the Chiefs. I'm 26 years old. I've watched them since I was 5, since they had Joe Montana on the team, and I've been a diehard fan. And of all the years, they've had Priest Holmes, they've had Larry Johnson. There is no player, even Tony Gonzalez, who's more dynamic ever than when he is the football than Jamaal Charles. At any point in time, I don't care if he's surrounded by people. I don't care if it looks like it's going to be a 5-yard loss. So, to me, if you're Smith, get him the ball, or get Travis Kelce the ball, who's a human mismatch. Get one of them, or even D'Anthony Thomas, who's so good in space, rather than throw it to Donnie Avery, who's going to drop the ball half the time anyway. I think it's a much better plan to have yards after the catch, and that's where a lot of the Chiefs' yardage come from in the passing game, is making a guy miss and then getting upfield.
You kind of talked about what I wanted to hear about Jamaal Charles. Just how good is he? Where would you put him among NFL running backs today and in recent history? How good is he? Truthfully, the Arizona Cardinals and its fans kind of looked at Andre Ellington entering this season as a guy who could be something like Jamaal Charles, and it hasn't been that. One, he's been dinged up all year, and two, it just hasn't been good. I mean, he's shown flashes, but that he's averaging, less than 3.5 yards a carry. He has a busted here and there. Now we've got a bad offensive line play, but how much of his success can be attributed to his playmaking ability, and how much can be attributed just to the scheme and to the offensive line around him? And where would you put him among running backs around the league now and in recent past?
Yeah, sure. Well, to be honest, I think my critique of our receivers disqualifies me from being a homer. But I mean, I'll be honest. I think he's the best running back in football. I really do. And the reason I say that is not because of the yards he puts up. I mean, sure, obviously that's a major part of it. But the one thing about Jamaal Charles, he does not get any credit for nationally, and you'll probably see it on Sunday a handful of times. There is not a running back in the league who is a better blocker than Jamaal Charles. He is unbelievable at just flattening a linebacker. And you look at him, and he's 6'2", maybe 200 pounds soaking wet, and you say, well, geez, how could that be? But he hits like a truck. I mean, he literally blocks like a fullback sometimes. And so he really, he reminds me of Marcus Allen when I watch him. The way he runs, he's a tipsy, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a good blocker. He knows the schemes. And, I think as far as in recent memory, I mean, sure, you have, LaDainian Tomlinson obviously was a phenomenal player. And of course, Emmitt Smith even a little while back for that, and Barry Sanders. I got to tell you, I believe that he's in that class, or close to it anyway. I mean, maybe he's going to have to do it for a few more years before he gets to that point. But as far as in their prime, when they have Todd Haley coaching the team and they won the division, actually the last time these two teams played in 2010, Jamaal Charles averaged 6.4 yards a carry. And I mean, it was really, if they didn't split time with Thomas Jones, who was beyond washed up, I think it's probably one of the big reasons Haley got fired eventually. But had they not have split time, he would have rushed for 2,000 yards without breaking a sweat that year. I think he had over 1,500. He played half the snaps. He was just unbelievable, and he still really is like that. I mean, Reed sometimes gets away from giving him the ball, I think kind of out of self-preservation, and because Niall Davis has been productive as a backup. But no, if anything, I think their offensive line, for the most part, has been a mess while he's been there. And a lot of times they've had Castle or Brady Quinn or some other quarterback that invited 8 and 9 into the box. I've always wondered if they ever got a couple of receivers on this team and could block, what his numbers would be like, because you look at him and just say, I mean, any given play, he is good for just going. I mean, the last year against the Raiders, he scored 5 touchdowns, and they didn't even play him in the fourth quarter. He literally, the Raider fans, I think, will hate him for the rest of the time. That game, he was incredible. And it's something that he does all the time. I think sometimes Chief fans almost take him for granted because it's just assumed.
Which leads me to this, Jamaal Charles, and this is Revenge of the Birds Radio. We're talking with ArrowheadPride.com's Matt Verderame, previewing the matchup between the Arizona Cardinals and the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, Jamaal Charles, the biggest name, the most important piece to the Kansas City Chiefs offense, leads to this matchup. The Arizona Cardinals, they stop the run. The Kansas City Chiefs, they run really well. The Arizona Cardinals stink at running the ball, and Andre Ellington is out for this weekend. So they'll be running with a combination of Stephon Taylor, last year's 5th-round draft pick, and Marion Grice, a local guy here known well, was, I believe, a 4th-round pick. He was a late-round pick by the Chargers who got cut out of the practice squad. Cardinals don't run the ball very well at all, and the Chiefs don't defend the run very well. So how do you see this matchup working out? Obviously, we saw a very good Seattle defense get shredded. At the same time, it was their first game without Brandon Mebane. Bobby Wagner wasn't healthy. So there were some injuries there. But how do you see this matchup between the very good running attack of Kansas City and the very good run-stopping attack defense of the Cardinals?
Well, I got to say, first of all, I have a ton of respect for Arizona's defense. I think Calais Campbell is one of the best players in the league, and nobody ever talks about him. I think Dan Williams is another big-time run stuffer in the middle of that defense. So there's certainly going to be a formidable test. I think it depends on if Reed gives Charles the football. There have been games where Reed sticks to the run like they did against Seattle, and they ran the ball 40 times in that game. There have been other games, like against Tennessee, where Reed runs the ball 8 times the entire game. And it just turns into one of these things where they try to get the ball down the field, and it's a nightmare. I would imagine they're going to try to run the football pretty early and often. I mean, you guys are tremendous cornerbacks. I can't imagine Andy Reid's going to try to challenge Antonio Cromartie with Frankie Hammond Jr. I mean, that's not going to work. So I can't imagine that they're going to go into that game with that mindset.
That's the matchup everyone's looking for, though.
Yeah, in Arizona. Yeah, believe me, they are not going to do that. I believe they will bring in Anthony Sherman, who you know, ex-Cardinal, who's been very good for the Chiefs. He actually just signed a contract extension with them. He's been excellent. And so I think the Chiefs are going to run a lot of two tight end sets. They use that a lot, maybe more than any other team in the NFL. And I think they will give the ball early and often to Charles. I don't expect either team to score a ton of points in this game. And one thing with Charles, forgive me if I'm a little off in the statistic, but in his career, he has only gotten the ball 20 times or more and not reached 100 yards once. So if he gets the ball 20 times, he's probably going to get 100 yards in the game. Yeah, I mean, just the way he is, he's always good for breaking a run or two for 25, 30 yards. So I think they'll run okay. I think the Cardinals are going to run better than people think they're going to run. I think, Stephon Taylor and Bryce, I'm not going to lie, I know a ton about them. I know that they haven't gotten a ton of action this year behind Ellington, but I expect, the Cardinals are going to be able to run the ball a little bit. I'll be curious to see. I know Fitzgerald's a game-time decision, but I imagine he'll play. I think, the Chiefs are probably going to put 8 down in the box and challenge the Cardinals to try to throw the ball against them. And might be able to. But I think the Chiefs are going to want to try to crowd the line, stuff the run, and force Stanton into one-on-one throws down the field against Gaines, against Sean Smith, against Hussein Abdullah. And I think that's going to be the whole key for the Arizona offense. If Stanton can do that, if the line can block Houston and Ali and Dontari Poe, and if Stanton can beat them one-on-one with throws, the Chiefs are going to have to back off. And at that point, I don't care who's running the ball. They're going to get yardage.
So if you look at the matchups that you brought up a little bit, where's the matchup that you see the Chiefs matching up most favorably? And conversely, what would be the least favorable matchup you see with the Chiefs and the Cardinals?
I think as far as favorably for Kansas City, I think I saw Jared Valdir should be back, and he's a quality tackle. But I think probably the outside rushers for the Chiefs, just because Justin Houston really hasn't been completely stopped all year. He's had a few games without sacks, but even then, he's very disruptive, and he's better against the run than most people realize. So I think that's usually a really favorable matchup for Kansas City. I think it will be again. I think that's something where the Cardinals maybe have to keep in a tight end or keep in a back to help block, because the one thing about the Chiefs defense, they can push the pocket. They can get in, they can create havoc and sack a guy, knock him around a little bit. So that's something I think is favorable for the Chiefs. As far as least favorable, I know I've been saying it. To me, it's the Cardinals secondary against the Chiefs receivers. I can't see any way that the Chiefs vertically challenge Arizona. The only thing I could see in this game, maybe, and I got to be honest, I'm a little ignorant to Arizona's slot corner situation, but I mean, Jason Avant came here last week, and in his limited time, actually played pretty well against them. I think he had 3 catches. He's somebody I could see the Chiefs not so much trying to get vertical with, but maybe running some crossing routes, some out routes, a little quick hits and things like that. I think Avant might be somebody they try to feature. Sometimes they'll put Bo in the slot, but generally speaking, I think the Cardinals' corners are going to just absolutely blanket anybody on the Chiefs' receiving end.
What would you say if give a prediction? Obviously, most Cardinals fans would say they're going to lean towards the Cardinals. Chiefs fans are going to lean towards the Chiefs. If you had to make an actual prediction for this game, which way would you see it going?
I made a prediction on Arrowhead Pride this week, and my weekly picks column. I picked the Chiefs to win, I believe, by a field goal. I think I picked them to win by 20-17 or something like that. And I got to be honest, the only reason I'm picking the Chiefs, because I think it's an extremely even game. I wouldn't be surprised either way. The only thing that would surprise me is one team blow out the other. I really think it's going to be a very nip-and-tuck game. But the only reason I picked Kansas City is I think this game might come down to somebody making a mistake. And I think Drew Stanton's more likely to make a mistake than Alex Smith is.
Very good point. that's definitely a valid way to go. Joel and I, we exchanged our predictions. Before I read his, we both had the same score. We both had 16-13. Joel for the Chiefs and I for the Cardinals. I see a lot of field goals, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a defensive struggle. I think, this is the type of game where does somebody get a big play on special teams? I know the Cardinals have been dangerous all year on special teams. Kansas City's been dangerous. They have one kickoff return for a touchdown. They've had a bunch of other returns where they've crossed the 50-yard line. Niall Davis, he's been very good on kick returns. D'Anthony Thomas is dangerous. So, to me, does somebody make a big play on special teams, or do special teams just constantly have one team starting at the other at the 50 and the other team starting at their own 10? So I think this is the type of game where I don't think you're going to see a lot of 80-yard drives. It's going to be very much a slugfest 1995 style football game where they go at it. And like I said, I don't have a feel for the game. I normally do. I think it's going to be really tight. Both teams are good. Both teams are definitely playoff teams. They're both desperate. And I think it's going to come down to who makes either the big special teams play or who makes that big mistake.
Well, there you have it, Arizona Cardinals fan. This has been Matt Verderame from ArrowheadPride.com. Been talking Chiefs and Cardinals. This should be a great matchup, Matt. I really, really appreciate the visit. Are you on social media at all? On Twitter? I know ArrowheadPride.com. I mean, their site Twitter is at Arrowhead Pride. What about yourself, Matt? How can fans follow you?
And thanks, Jess. Anytime. I'm glad to be on the show. It's been a blast. My Twitter handle is just at Matt Verderame, which is just my name, just MATT, and then my last name is, too hard to spell, just VERDERAME. So it's simple enough. If you want to find me, I'm on Arrowhead Pride and on Twitter and all that.
All right. Appreciate it, Matt. We're expecting a great game. May the best team win, and may that best team, at least from my perspective, be the Arizona Cardinals. But after that, I have no problem with the Chiefs being big winners thereafter. But you can win the next three. That's fine.
Hey,
but this week, it's got to be Arizona.
At this point to stay healthy. I just want both teams to stay healthy at this point. It's been a carnival for both teams. So hopefully nobody gets hurt.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Matt. We will talk to you again another time. I hope so. I hope that we get the opportunity, man.
Okay. Hopefully it'll be for the Super Bowl.
Yes, that'd be a great one. Let's have it again. Chiefs Cardinals for the Super Bowl. I'm okay with that.
All right.
Thanks for coming on, man.
No problem. Thank you.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/revengeofthebirds.